A luxury car saleswoman believed she could assess a customer based on their appearance. When Sandra Bullock entered the dealership dressed in a hoodie and cap, she dismissed her without a second thought. Little did she know, she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. However, when Keanu Reeves walked in, he did something that left everyone speechless, and you won't believe how this story unfolds. What happened next turned into a scandal no one anticipated. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The parking lot of the luxury dealership mirrors the opulence of its clientele, with gleaming cars arranged like jewels on display. The mirrored glass facade reflects the clear sky as a discreet SUV pulls into a spot near the entrance. A woman steps out, dressed in a blue hoodie and a black cap. Her movements are calm, her posture unhurried. She gently closes the door and adjusts her sunglasses before heading toward the showroom entrance. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of new leather, and the cars glisten under the showroom lights. Employees in perfectly tailored suits move between high-profile clients, offering them strategic, personalized attention. Sandra Bullock enters unnoticed, her gaze sweeping across the cars, genuine interest flickering in her eyes. But no one seems to pay her any mind. In this dealership, appearances matter. Well-dressed men with expensive watches and women in designer dresses glide between the vehicles as salespeople carefully select whom to assist. Near the service desk, a saleswoman in polished high heels scans the showroom, identifying promising clients. Her eyes briefly land on the casually dressed woman in the hoodie and cap before dismissing her with a well-rehearsed smile. She approaches a couple clad in branded outfits, engaging them in warm conversation. Sandra continues walking through the cars, analyzing their specifications and feeling the texture of the interiors. Her eyes lock onto a luxury convertible, its details making it irresistible. The white leather seats, the polished exterior, the sophisticated dashboard. She steps closer, her fingers grazing the handle, yet no salesperson rushes over to assist her. After a few minutes, Sandra decides to seek assistance. She approaches the service desk just as the same saleswoman from earlier finishes speaking with the wealthy couple. Upon seeing Sandra approach, the saleswoman's expression shifts ever so slightly, polite but detached. "Hi, can I help you?" she asks, adjusting her name tag. Sandra gestures toward the convertible. "I like that model. Is it available?" The saleswoman glances briefly at the car, then back at Sandra, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of her lips, but her eyes betray a hint of judgment. "Oh, that's one of our most exclusive models. It comes with a premium package. Maybe I can show you some more affordable options that might suit what you're looking for." Sandra keeps her expression neutral. "I'm really interested in this one. I'd like to know more about it." The saleswoman hesitates, as if debating whether it's worth spending time on this customer. Finally, she exhales softly and concedes, "All right, I can show you the specifications, but just so you know, this model comes at quite a high price." Sandra smiles slightly. "That's fine. I'd still like to learn more about it." The saleswoman swallows hard. Sandra follows her to the car, listening attentively as she explains the technical details. She asks about engine performance, interior materials, and customization options. With each question, the saleswoman looks increasingly surprised. "You seem to know a lot about cars," she comments, trying to hide her astonishment. Sandra shrugs. "I like to know what I'm buying." The saleswoman forces a smile. "Well, this model offers exceptional drivability, but of course, it's a car designed for a very specific clientele." Sandra ignores the implication and runs her fingers over the leather steering wheel, feeling its smooth texture. "Sounds great. Is it available for a test drive?" The saleswoman lets out a short laugh, as if unsure she heard correctly. "A test drive? Yes, I'd like to see how it handles on the road." The saleswoman hesitates. "Normally, we only allow test drives for clients with serious purchasing intentions." Sandra raises an eyebrow. "And I don't seem serious?" The saleswoman backtracks. "Oh, that's not what I meant. It's just that this model has very high demand, so we're a bit more selective with test drives." Sandra remains silent for a few moments, simply observing the woman. She notices the discomfort in the saleswoman's eyes, the way her body language tries to mask her initial judgment. Finally, Sandra offers a slight smile. "That's fine. Just put me on the list of interested buyers." The saleswoman looks relieved, but before she can respond, a male voice interrupts. "Excuse me, do you have this model available for a test drive?" Sandra turns and sees a well-dressed man with neatly styled hair and an expensive watch on his wrist. The saleswoman's demeanor shifts instantly, her smile becoming genuine, her voice more enthusiastic. "Of course, sir. I can arrange that for you right away." Sandra watches the scene unfold without a word. She simply observes as the man receives a completely different level of treatment. As the saleswoman eagerly sets up the test drive for the new customer, Sandra remains composed. She glances back at the convertible, then at the saleswoman, who doesn't even bother to finish their conversation before shifting her attention to the wealthier-looking client. Sandra slides her hands into the pockets of her hoodie and tilts her head slightly, as if confirming something to herself. "I guess that makes things pretty clear, doesn't it?" she murmurs under her breath. She turns and begins walking away, unnoticed. But before leaving, she casts one last look at the convertible. Her interest hasn't waned. In fact, it has only grown stronger. The difference in treatment did not go unnoticed. What the saleswoman didn't know yet was that she was about to discover exactly who she had been underestimating. Sandra is interested in a luxury car. Will she be assisted before an unexpected twist reveals who she really is? Sandra remains near the luxury convertible, taking in every detail. When the saleswoman returns, her smile is forced, but this time she doesn't even try to hide the condescension in her voice. "So, are you still interested in this model?" Sandra keeps her gaze steady. "Yes, I'd like to take it for a test drive." The saleswoman raises an eyebrow, as if Sandra just said something ridiculous. "A test drive?" "Yes, I want to see how it handles on the road before making a decision." The saleswoman lets out a small, amused laugh. "Oh, so you actually want to drive this car?" Sandra doesn't react. "Yes." The saleswoman crosses her arms and leans slightly forward, her fake smile now completely gone. "Look, I don't know if I made this clear, but this model isn't for just anyone. We don't let just anyone test drive it. This time, there's no attempt at subtlety. The insult is direct. Just anyone?" Sandra repeats slowly. The saleswoman tilts her head slightly, as if Sandra should already understand what she means. "Yes, this car is one of our most expensive models. People who test drive it are usually pre-approved customers or have an established relationship with our brand." Sandra stares at her for a moment, processing every word. "So only pre-approved customers can test it?" "Exactly." Sandra takes a slow step forward, not breaking eye contact. "But that guy over there," she gestures subtly toward a well-dressed man speaking to another salesperson. "He doesn't look like a long-time customer." The saleswoman doesn't even glance at him. "Oh, he fits the profile. You see, we can tell he's a qualified buyer." Sandra exhales a quiet chuckle. "And my profile isn't qualified?" The saleswoman finally drops the mask. "Look, don't take it personally, okay? But we get a lot of people who just want to take these luxury cars for a joyride. You know, take some pictures, post online, and I'm sure you understand what I mean." She emphasizes the last phrase with a pointed look, as if giving Sandra a warning. Sandra notices that several customers and employees around them are beginning to pay attention, but the saleswoman doesn't care. "Honestly, I think you should consider another car," she continues, her voice oozing fake sympathy. "We have an amazing selection of models that might better suit your lifestyle." Sandra remains composed. "And what lifestyle would that be?" The saleswoman lets her gaze drift obviously to Sandra's casual hoodie and cap. "Something more affordable." This time, it's not just a suggestion, it's a dismissal. The saleswoman isn't just underestimating Sandra. She's actively trying to push her out. Sandra doesn't flinch. She crosses her arms and tilts her head slightly. "So you're saying you won't let me test drive the car?" The saleswoman smirks, taking clear satisfaction in what she's about to say. "That's exactly what I'm saying." The response is quick, cold, and final. Sandra feels the weight of several curious eyes watching them. Some employees exchange glances, realizing the saleswoman might have just gone too far. But the woman doesn't back down. She steps back, arms crossed, and delivers the final blow. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have real customers to attend to." And with that, she turns her back on Sandra, no hesitation, no second thought. She immediately walks toward a wealthy-looking couple and greets them with warmth and enthusiasm. The difference in treatment couldn't be more obvious. Sandra stays in place for a moment, feeling the silent attention of the room on her, but her face remains calm. She has seen enough. Before leaving, Sandra walks up to the reception desk, where another salesman watches her, looking a little uneasy. "Is there an issue, ma'am?" he inquires cautiously. Sandra smiles. "I just want to verify something. What are the official requirements for a test drive here?" The salesman shifts uneasily. "Well, typically, we need some proof that the client is genuinely interested in buying. Proof like..." He hesitates further, "a document, a history of past purchases, or a down payment to reserve the car." Sandra nods slowly, as if taking in the information. "And did the saleswoman mention any of that to the couple over there?" The salesman falls silent, realizing Sandra is correct. Before he can respond, the saleswoman re-enters the conversation. "Ma'am, I've already explained our policy. Let's not waste any more time." Sandra looks at her, unfazed. The saleswoman crosses her arms and delivers a final harsh remark. "But if you're really looking for a car, maybe you should try another place. There's a dealership downtown with models more within your reach. I think you'd like it." She smiles smugly, as if doing Sandra a favor. Sandra just smiles back, "Thanks for the suggestion." And without another word, she turns and walks calmly toward the exit. Before leaving, she pauses briefly at the door, glancing once more at the luxury convertible she's still interested in. Only now, she has something else in mind, a plan. The saleswoman, still grinning in satisfaction, refocuses on the wealthy couple. But then, the atmosphere changes. An unexpected presence is about to enter the dealership, and when he does, everything will be turned upside down. Sandra decides to test the saleswoman's integrity by requesting a test drive of the most expensive model. How will the saleswoman react to this bold request? The dealership continues as usual. Wealthy customers browse the cars, salespeople navigate between them, and the arrogant saleswoman carries on as if nothing happened. Sandra, however, hasn't left the dealership. She simply took a few steps back, unbothered, showing no visible indignation. But inside, she knows exactly what is about to happen. Then, the automatic doors of the dealership slide open again, subtly shifting the atmosphere. A tall man in a black leather jacket and sunglasses strides in with calm but purposeful steps. His slightly tousled dark hair sways as he moves. He doesn't need to say a word. His presence immediately commands attention. The saleswoman, in the middle of speaking with another customer, glances toward the entrance absent-mindedly until the man stops in the middle of the showroom. His gaze scans the space until it locks onto Sandra. Then, with an easy, natural smile, he speaks, "Hope I didn't keep you waiting too long, Bullock." It was like a bomb detonated in slow motion inside the saleswoman's mind. Bullock, the name thundered in her head. She felt the blood drain from her face. Her eyes widened in pure shock. The woman in the blue hoodie and black cap, the one she had humiliated, the one she had refused to serve, was Sandra Bullock. The next few seconds stretched into eternity. Customers around them froze, murmurs rippled across the showroom. The saleswoman couldn't breathe properly. She felt the crushing weight of every single pair of eyes on her. Customers, employees, even the manager. Everyone realized at the same time that she had made a catastrophic mistake. Sandra, however, was not surprised at all. She held a slight smirk, simply watching the reality sink in for the saleswoman. Keanu, still unaware of what was going on, grinned warmly as he walked up to Sandra. "Good to see you, Bullock. Did you pick out your car?" The saleswoman felt her stomach drop. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She didn't know if she should try to explain herself, pretend nothing had happened, or just collapse from embarrassment on the spot. Keanu finally noticed the sudden awkward silence in the dealership. He frowned, looking around. "What's up? Why does everyone look so tense?" Sandra smirked and, for the first time, turned directly to the saleswoman, who now looked as pale as a ghost. I think someone just realized they made the worst mistake of their life. The saleswoman gulped but couldn't say a word. Keanu followed Sandra's gaze and finally noticed the woman trembling with nerves. "Do you work here?" he asked, still unaware of the full story. The woman forced a nervous smile. "Yes, Mr. Reeves, welcome. It's such an honor to have you here." The sudden shift in her tone was so extreme that even the other employees cringed on her behalf. But Sandra wasn't going to let her off the hook that easily. "Funny, now I seem to have the right profile to be served, huh?" The saleswoman held her breath. She was trapped. By now, everyone in the store had figured out what was happening. The employees stepped away discreetly, leaving the saleswoman alone in the fire pit. Keanu felt the tension and looked between Sandra and the woman. "What's going on here?" The saleswoman started sweating. "Nothing, just a little misunderstanding, Mr. Reeves, haha." Sandra let out a dry, amused laugh. "A misunderstanding? Then explain to me why just a few minutes ago I couldn't even touch this car, and now all of a sudden you're so polite." The saleswoman began stammering. "I didn't. It wasn't like that." Keanu looked between Sandra and the woman, finally putting the pieces together. "Wait, you refused to serve Sandra?" The saleswoman tried to recover. "No, yes, I just didn't know she was." Sandra crossed her arms, finishing the sentence for her. "Rich?" The saleswoman shut her eyes for a second, feeling the sting of the blow. Keanu sighed heavily, shaking his head. "This still happens?" Sandra smirked victoriously. She locked eyes with the saleswoman and delivered the question the woman feared the most. "So tell me, can I take the test drive now?" The saleswoman nearly choked on her own breath. Of course, we can arrange that right now." Sandra arched an eyebrow. "Now I can?" The saleswoman nodded frantically, desperately trying to save herself. But Sandra pretended to think for a moment. No thanks. I'm not interested anymore." The saleswoman looked horrified. "What?" Sandra smiled even wider. "I prefer to buy from people who treat me well from the start." The saleswoman's face twisted in pure despair. She opened her mouth to try to fix it, but there was nothing left to say. Sandra turned to Keanu and shrugged. "Shall we go?" Keanu let out a low chuckle and shook his head. "Absolutely." The saleswoman stood there frozen as the two of them walked toward the exit. But just before walking through the doors, Sandra paused. She turned one last time to the woman and flashed a sharp smile. "Oh, and thanks for the suggestion about the cheaper dealership, but I think I'll just buy straight from the manufacturer instead." The saleswoman held her breath, feeling the final crushing blow. And then, without another word, Sandra and Keanu walked out, leaving the store in absolute silence. Now that everyone knows who Sandra is, how will Keanu react to hearing how she was treated? The dealership is still in shock after Sandra and Keanu's triumphant moment. Customers whisper to each other, employees exchange nervous glances, and at the center of it all, the saleswoman remains frozen, as if still trying to process the disaster she just caused. She feels her body trembling, but not from the cold, from pure shame, regret, and absolute fear of the consequences. Keanu halted abruptly just before the exit, choosing not to leave. He slowly turned around, directing a piercing gaze at the saleswoman. She swallowed nervously, while Sandra paused beside him, sensing the impending confrontation. Keanu slipped his hands into his jacket pockets and, with a voice calm yet heavy with intensity, inquired, "Is anyone going to explain what just happened here?" The room fell into a deep silence. The saleswoman opened her mouth, but no words emerged. Realizing her job was on the line, she panicked. "Mr. Reeves, Miss Bullock, please let me rectify this. I can offer you a special discount," she stammered. Sandra raised an eyebrow. "A discount?" The saleswoman nodded eagerly. "Yes, as an apology, a VIP discount." Sandra glanced at Keanu and chuckled. "What do you think, Keanu? Should we take the VIP discount?" Keanu crossed his arms, feigning contemplation. Should we accept the discount or go to another dealership and make sure everyone hears about this incident?" The saleswoman visibly shrank. Keanu then addressed the manager. "My advice: teach your staff not to judge customers by their appearance." The manager nodded quickly, sweating profusely. Keanu smirked slightly. Good luck with the online reviews. With that, he and Sandra exited the dealership without a backward glance. The saleswoman stood there, crushed by the weight of her mistake. She apologized and promised to change. But was her change genuine? The dealership's automatic doors closed slowly, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with tension. The saleswoman remained rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by the public humiliation and disgrace. The contemptuous looks from Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock made her wish to vanish. Her colleagues avoided eye contact, but the whispers of customers gossiping about the incident made her face burn with shame. The dealership manager finally broke the silence. "My office now?" The saleswoman felt her stomach twist but obeyed without question. Inside the manager's office, the air was suffocatingly tense. He slammed the door shut and glared at her harshly. "Do you have any idea how badly you just messed up?" The saleswoman kept her head down, but the manager slammed his palm on the desk, demanding, "Look at me when I'm talking to you. Look at me when I'm talking to you." She flinched and lifted her eyes, filled with panic. "We just lost two of the most influential customers in the world because you judged someone by their appearance," he said, taking a deep breath and rubbing his face, struggling to contain his anger. "Do you know what that means?" The saleswoman remained silent, her anxiety skyrocketing. The manager threw a tablet onto the desk, displaying multiple headlines. Sandra Bullock humiliated at luxury dealership. Keanu Reeves exposes discriminatory treatment. Saleswoman denies Sandra Bullock a test drive. Dealership faces online boycott. Keanu Reeves destroys arrogant saleswoman in luxury car showroom. Each headline felt like a gut punch. The dealership was being massacred online. The manager continued, "Our ratings have plummeted, and guess who's going to take the fall for this?" The saleswoman felt the blood drain from her face. "Please, sir, let me fix this." The manager laughed coldly. "Fix it? How? Do you think you can just apologize and everything will be fine?" She didn't know what to say. The manager stared at her for a long moment, then finally sighed heavily. "I should fire you right now." The saleswoman held her breath, but to her surprise, he didn't say the final words. "But maybe there's still a chance," he said. The saleswoman blinked, shocked. "I want you to try and redeem yourself, not to save your job, but because you need to learn a lesson," he pointed toward the door. "You're going to leave this office and find a way to apologize genuinely to Sandra Bullock." Her heart raced with anxiety. "And if I do?" The manager crossed his arms. "Then maybe I'll consider not firing you." The saleswoman nodded quickly and rushed out of the office before he changed his mind. But now she had a problem. How was she supposed to apologize to Sandra Bullock? Her palms sweated profusely as she forced herself to swallow her pride and finally said, "I just wanted to apologize." Sandra raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The saleswoman gulped. "I know I was arrogant, judgmental, unfair, and I have no excuse for it. All I can say is I messed up badly." Sandra tilted her head, studying the woman in front of her. "You want me to accept your apology?" The saleswoman nodded quickly. "Not for my job. I know that's already lost. I just want you to know that I genuinely regret what I did." Sandra stayed silent for a few moments. Then, to the saleswoman's surprise, she gave a small smile. "You know, I've dealt with a lot of people like you." The saleswoman lowered her head, ashamed, but Sandra continued, "Not many have the courage to admit when they're wrong." The saleswoman looked up, surprised. Sandra took another sip of her coffee and placed the cup back on the table. "So you're sorry? Great. Now the real question is, what are you going to do with that?" The saleswoman frowned. "What do you mean?" Sandra smirked knowingly. "Being sorry is easy. Changing is hard." The saleswoman fell silent, reflecting on those words. Then finally, she responded, "I'm going to prove that I've learned." Sandra nodded, satisfied. "Then I accept your apology." The saleswoman felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you." "Really?" Sandra stood up, picked up her coffee, and winked at her. "Good luck with that." With that, she walked away, leaving the saleswoman standing there, contemplating what she would do with her second chance. The saleswoman promised to change, but would her transformation be genuine? Or would she be tested again by an unexpected future customer? A week had passed since the incident. The dealership had taken a hit both online and internally. Negative reviews flooded in, and the scandal made headlines for days. Many customers who had been loyal to the brand now questioned whether they wanted to shop there again. And the saleswoman? She was still employed, barely. The manager had allowed her to stay, but on one condition. You either prove you've changed, or you're out. No second chances. She had one shot to show that she had truly learned her lesson, and today that shot was about to come. As the deal was finalized, the manager watched from a distance, arms crossed. He had been observing the whole time and saw everything. When the customer finally left, the saleswoman turned to face him. There was a long, tense moment of silence. Then the manager smirked. Not bad. The saleswoman let out a breathless chuckle. Thanks. The manager nodded. Looks like you actually learned something. She grinned. Yeah, I think I did. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace because she hadn't just saved her job. She had saved herself. That night after work, the saleswoman checked her phone. A notification popped up. It was a new online review for the dealership. She clicked on it, curious. The username, Sandra Bullock. Her breath caught as she read the comment. Sometimes the best lessons come from the worst mistakes. I hope they stick. The saleswoman smiled to herself. She had no idea if Sandra truly forgave her, but one thing was certain. She had been given a second chance, and this time she wasn't going to waste it. The dealership received a surprisingly powerful online review from Sandra. How would this affect the company's future and the saleswoman's career? If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience. Thank you for watching. If you missed our last story, don't worry. I've got you covered. I'll leave it here for you to watch. Hope you enjoy it. In the sparkling heart of Beverly Hills, where appearance is everything and first impressions can determine your success or your failure, a simple act of prejudice was about to dismantle a carefully constructed facade of superiority. What happened that evening at Lumiere would become a lesson in humility that no one present would ever forget, especially Ashley Martinez, the waitress who made the grave mistake of judging a book by its cover. The evening began like any other at Lumiere, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Beverly Hills. The crystal chandeliers cast their warm glow over the meticulously set tables while the soft notes of a grand piano filled the air. The restaurant was a symphony of elegant whispers, clinking glasses, and occasional bursts of refined laughter. Ashley Martinez stood at her station, observing her domain with the expert eye of someone who believed she belonged to the elite rather than serve them. At 28, she had carefully built her image. Her black uniform always impeccably pressed, her dark hair pulled back into a flawless bun, and her makeup subtle yet perfect. She was proud to work at Lumiere, even though her pride had long crossed the line into arrogance. Table 12 needs a wine refill, she instructed a junior waiter, her tone carrying the authority she had earned in 3 years of service. And remember, we serve from the right, always from the right. She smiled to herself, enjoying the way new staff members rushed to meet her exacting standards. The restaurant's glass doors opened silently, letting in a gust of cool evening air as a lone man walked in quietly, almost apologetically. His appearance caught Ashley's attention immediately, and not in a good way. He wore jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and a leather jacket that had seen better days. His long dark hair was slightly unkempt, and his boots were scuffed. Ashley's perfectly shaped eyebrows furrowed. Lumiere was not some casual restaurant chain. They had standards to uphold. She watched as the man approached the host stand, where she was covering the dinner break for their regular hostess. "Good evening," he said softly, his voice gentle and modest. "A table for one, please." Ashley gave him her practice smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir, but do you have a reservation?" Her tone subtly suggested that he must be in the wrong place. "No, I don't," he replied, seemingly unfazed by her barely concealed disdain. "I see," Ashley drawled, letting the words hang in the air. "Well, this is Lumiere. We're one of the most exclusive restaurants in Beverly Hills. Our main courses start at $200. She emphasized the price, expecting, hoping it would make him leave. Instead, The man simply nodded. That's fine. Is there a table available? Ashley's smile stiffened. Let me check availability. She made a show of consulting her tablet, even though she knew perfectly well that several tables were free. We have a table in the back section. She hoped the location would discourage him, but once again, he just nodded. That would be perfect, thank you. As she led him through the restaurant, Ashley deliberately took the longest route, making sure he passed by the well-dressed diners who glanced up from their meals to stare at him. She could practically feel their judgmental gazes, and it gave her a sense of satisfaction. This would teach him to know his place. The table was the worst in the restaurant, right by the kitchen doors, where the clatter of dishes and the shouting of chefs would disrupt any attempt at a peaceful dinner. Here you go, she announced, dropping the menu onto the table with just a bit more force than necessary. Your waiter will be with you shortly. She turned to leave, then paused, unable to resist adding, just to confirm, sir, you're aware of our pricing structure? The man looked up at her, his eyes calm and kind. Yes, I am. Thank you. Something about his composure irritated Ashley even more. People like him were supposed to be intimidated by places like Lumiere. They were supposed to feel uncomfortable, out of place. But this man seemed perfectly at ease, and that annoyed her more than she cared to admit. As she walked away, she stopped at the service station, where another waiter, Michael, was preparing drinks. Can you believe the nerve? She whispered, though loud enough to be heard. Walking in here dressed like that? I give him 10 minutes before he makes up an excuse and leaves. Michael glanced at the man, then back at Ashley. Maybe we should just serve him like any other guest. Please, Ashley scoffed. He probably saved for months just to try to impress someone. Well, he chose the wrong restaurant for that. What Ashley didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man in the worn leather jacket was Keanu Reeves, who had quietly acquired a controlling stake in Lumiere 6 months earlier. He preferred to observe his establishments incognito, believing it was the only way to see their true character. And right now, he was seeing quite a lot. As the evening progressed, Ashley's behavior became increasingly inappropriate. She forgot to bring water to the table, took an extraordinarily long time to take his order, and when she finally did, her comments were laced with condescension. Wagyu beef is extremely sophisticated, she explained as if speaking to a child. It might be a bit advanced for some palates. She emphasized the word advanced while casting another look of disapproval at his casual clothing. I'll take it, he said simply. Medium rare. Certainly, Ashley replied, her tone suggesting she doubted he even knew what medium rare meant. And for wine, we have an extensive collection, although I should mention that our wines start at $200 a bottle. The Chateau Margaux, $25.15, please. Ashley's smug smile wavered slightly. That was a $2,000 bottle of wine, and he had ordered it without even glancing at the wine list. But she quickly recovered, convincing herself that he must have heard the name somewhere and was just trying to show off. Very well, sir, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I'll just need to verify your payment method before placing such a substantial order. Instead of being offended, the man reached into his worn leather jacket and pulled out a black American Express Centurion card. A card available by invitation only, rarer than any wine in Lumiere's cellar. Ashley's hand trembled slightly as she took it, but she couldn't resist reading the name aloud in disbelief. Keanu Reeves. Her voice trailed off as realization began to set in. She looked at him again. This time she really looked, and she felt her stomach drop. The kind eyes, the quiet demeanor, the effortless confidence. How had she not recognized one of Hollywood's most beloved actors? But Keanu wasn't done surprising her. Yes, he said calmly. Though tonight, I'm here less as an actor and more as an owner. I acquired Lumiere 6 months ago. I like to visit occasionally unannounced to see how things are really run. His voice remained gentle, but there was steel beneath the softness. And I must say, Ashley, I've seen quite a lot tonight. The crystal glasses in Lumiere seemed to tremble in the sudden silence that fell over the dining room. Ashley stood frozen, her carefully maintained composure cracking like thin ice under the summer sun. The black American Express card in her hand felt impossibly heavy as the weight of her mistake came crashing down on her. I, she stammered, abandoned by her usual eloquence. The dining room had grown so silent that even the kitchen staff had noticed, peeking through the service doors with curious expressions. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his chair, watching her with the same gentle expression he had worn all evening. But now, that gentleness felt different. It wasn't meekness, as she had mistaken it for. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "Perhaps," he said softly, "we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." He gestured toward the restaurant's private dining room. His movement caused several nearby diners to suddenly become fascinated with their plates, pretending not to watch. Ashley's legs felt like lead as she followed him, painfully aware of the whispers trailing behind them, the piercing gazes of her colleagues who had witnessed her behavior all night. Michael, the waiter she had brushed off earlier, couldn't quite hide his satisfied smirk as she passed. The private dining room was a sanctuary of rich mahogany and deep burgundy wallpaper, typically reserved for Hollywood power lunches and celebrity celebrations. Now it felt like a courtroom, with Ashley as the defendant, waiting for judgment. "Please, have a seat." Keanu gestured to one of the plush chairs, his voice still kind, which somehow made it worse. Ashley would have preferred anger. She knew how to handle anger, but this calm disappointment was far more devastating. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't even know where to start with my apology." He raised a hand, silencing her gently. Leaning forward slightly, his eyes locked onto hers. "Help me understand," he said, "why you thought it was acceptable to treat someone the way you treated me tonight." Ashley's mouth opened and closed several times before she could form any words. "I was just trying to maintain the restaurant standards. Our clientele expects a certain level of what?" Keanu interrupted, his voice still gentle, but now laced with something sharper. "Exclusivity? Or was it elitism you were trying to uphold?" Outside in the main dining area, the usual dinner service continued, but there was an undercurrent of tension. The waitstaff moved between tables with exaggerated care, straining to catch any fragments of conversation from the private room. Regular customers who had witnessed Ashley's behavior earlier were now engaged in hushed discussions, sharing their own experiences with her particular brand of judgment. "You know," Keanu continued, "I bought Lumiere because I believe in its potential to be more than just another exclusive Beverly Hills restaurant. I saw an opportunity to create a space where exceptional food could bring people together, regardless of how they looked or where they came from." Ashley felt tears sting her eyes. "Sir, I didn't know." "That's exactly the point," he said firmly. "You didn't know who I was, and that shouldn't have mattered. Every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, whether they're wearing Armani or military surplus." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Marcus Chun, Lumiere's general manager, stepped inside, his face tight with anxiety. "Mr. Reeves, I was just informed of the situation. I want to assure you that this behavior is completely unacceptable, and thank you, Marcus," Keanu said, his tone making it clear that now was not the time for damage control. "But I'd like to finish my conversation first." "Ashley." Marcus nodded quickly and withdrew, but not before giving Ashley a look that clearly conveyed the gravity of her situation. As the door closed behind him, Ashley felt the last remnants of her professional facade crumble. "I worked so hard to be here," she said, her voice breaking. 3 years building a reputation, mastering every aspect of fine dining, becoming someone who belonged in a place like this. I just wanted to protect all of that. And in doing so," Keanu observed, "you became exactly what you thought you were fighting against. Someone who judges others based on appearances, who uses their position to make others feel small." The truth of his words hit Ashley like a physical blow. She thought of all the times she had dismissed guests who didn't meet her standards, the subtle ways she had made them feel unwelcome. How many incredible people had she turned away? How many memorable nights had she ruined with her prejudices? "The irony," Keanu continued, "is that true elegance has nothing to do with designer labels or expensive watches. It's about how you treat others, especially those you think can't do anything for you in return." Outside, the sun had fully set, and the restaurant's dinner service was in full swing. Through the private dining room windows, The lights of Beverly Hills shone like stars, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside. The pianist had resumed his soft melodies, but the music couldn't mask the tension that still lingered in the air. "I don't expect you to change your perspective overnight," Keanu said, rising from his chair. "But I do expect better from anyone associated with this restaurant. Marcus will discuss the details with you, but I want you to take some time to reflect on what happened here tonight." As if on cue, Marcus reappeared at the door, his expression grave. Ashley knew, without being told, that her time at Lumiere was over. She had spent 3 years building her reputation in this restaurant, and in a single evening, she had completely destroyed it. "One last thing," Keanu said as she stood to leave. "The next time you're tempted to judge someone based on their appearance, remember this night. Remember how you felt when you realized that the person you dismissed as unworthy was actually someone who could have taught you something valuable about humility and respect." As Ashley followed Marcus out of the private room, she felt the weight of every gaze in the restaurant on her. The regular patrons who had witnessed her behavior watched with barely concealed interest. Her colleagues, who had endured her condescension for years, struggled to hide their satisfaction at her downfall. But it was the quiet disappointment in Keanu's eyes that would haunt her the most. In trying so desperately to prove that she belonged to the world of luxury and exclusivity, she had revealed herself to be exactly what she had always feared: common. Not in her appearance or her knowledge of fine dining, but in the smallness of her spirit and the narrowness of her judgments. The evening service continued around her, the rhythm of fine dining uninterrupted by her personal catastrophe. Waiters glided between tables, sommeliers recommended perfect wine pairings, and the kitchen produced its usual symphony of extraordinary dishes. But for Ashley, everything had changed. She had learned, in the hardest way possible, that true class had nothing to do with what you wear or how much you spend. It was about how you treat others, especially when you think no one important is watching. The news of what had happened at Lumiere that night spread through the Beverly Hills restaurant scene like wildfire. Within days, the story of the waitress who had unknowingly insulted her famous boss became a cautionary tale in hospitality circles. But for those who had been there, the real story wasn't about celebrity or status. It was about something much more fundamental. In the weeks that followed, Lumiere underwent subtle but significant changes. Keanu Reeves, true to his reputation for kindness and wisdom, didn't just fire Ashley and move on. Instead, he used the incident as a catalyst for transformation across his entire restaurant group. What happened here wasn't just about one person's behavior, he explained to his management team during an emergency meeting the next morning. It was a symptom of a culture that we need to address. Marcus Chun, still shaken from the previous night's events, sat at the conference table with a notebook full of proposed changes. "Mr. Reeves, we've already begun reviewing our training protocols. Nothing like this will ever happen again." "Good," Keanu nodded. "But it's not enough. We need to change the way we think about hospitality from the ground up." Over the next month, Lumiere became the birthplace of what would come to be known in the industry as the Reeves Standard, a comprehensive approach to service that emphasized genuine warmth over rigid formality, inclusivity over exclusivity. The crystal chandeliers still sparkled. The food remained exceptional, but there was a new spirit in the air. As for Ashley, her departure from Lumiere was not the public execution many might have expected. Instead, she was given the opportunity to resign quietly, with a final conversation that would change the course of her life. "I know you expect me to fire you," Keanu said during their last meeting, "and legally, I would be justified in doing so. But I think there's an opportunity here for something more meaningful than punishment." Ashley, who had spent the past week in a state of anxious uncertainty, looked up surprised. "I don't understand. I'm offering you a choice," he explained. "You can walk away from this industry completely, or you can take what you've learned and use it to become something better. There's a new restaurant opening in San Francisco. It's not part of our group, but it's owned by someone I trust. They're looking for someone who understands both the technical aspects of fine dining and the importance of genuine hospitality. Someone who has learned, the hard way, that true service comes from the heart, not from judgment." Ashley hesitated. "Why would you help me after what I did?" Keanu's response was characteristically thoughtful. Because sometimes the people who learn the hardest lessons become the best teachers. Your experience here could be the end of your career or the beginning of something far more meaningful. The choice is yours. 1 month later, Ashley stood in the dining room of a new restaurant in San Francisco's North Beach district. The space was different from Lumiere, warmer, more welcoming, but no less elegant. As she trained new servers, her words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. The most important thing to remember, she told them, is that every guest who walks through that door is first and foremost a person. Their clothes, their appearance, their mannerisms, none of that matters. What matters is how we make them feel. At Lumiere, the changes implemented after the incident had transformed the restaurant in subtle but profound ways. The food was still extraordinary, the service still impeccable, but there was a warmth that hadn't existed before. Regular patrons noticed that the staff seemed more genuine, more human. The invisible barriers that once separated worthy guests from unworthy ones had dissolved. The table by the kitchen, Ashley's former punishment corner, became something of a legend. Keanu had deliberately designated it as the owner's table, and occasionally sat there during his unannounced visits. Dressed in his signature casual style, he served as a silent reminder to the staff. Appearances can be deceiving, and true class has nothing to do with how you look, but everything to do with how you treat others.